Hello, everyone. Welcome to the World at War podcast. We have another fantastic show for you today. But before we get into that, I want to mention a couple things. One, please hit the subscribe button. That really helps out the channel. Make sure you hit that little ring button. That way you know when new interviews and new videos are being dropped. That's most important, to be quite honest, for the sustainability of the channel and to bring other amazing indie comic writers, creators, artists, all that good stuff to the show. That is our goal, is to bring you the very best of who's making comics today. On the other hand, I wanted to introduce you to our newest sponsor of the show, Cien Chilies. That's right. If you love hot sauce and you love the taste of adding something amazing to your tacos, your burritos, your hamburgers, or to any other meal, make sure that you go to cienchilies.com and you pick up. They have the Thai bird, they have the habanero, they have the jalapeno, they actually have a mustard seed as well, which is absolutely incredible. They're always throwing in really cool stickers and whatnot. And because they're a sponsor of the show, at checkout, just type in comics and you will save 15% off your total bill. That's right, 15% off just from being a family member of the World at War Comics podcast. All right, today's guests are Joe Aubrey and Eric Peterson, two of the three co-creators of Space Bastards, one of my favorite comic books. Absolutely love it. If you haven't read Space Bastards, you're really making a mistake. It is so much fun. It really follows a group of misfits that are part of a postal service, an intergalactic postal service. And this postal service is a little unique because you are paid as a postal service worker by getting that package to the end user. But getting it from the person you picked it up from to that end user is extremely dangerous. It's passing hands constantly as other postal workers are trying to kill you to be able to take that package, because these packages are worth a lot. And every time that package changes hands, the price goes up as far as the worth of the deliverance of that package. So I don't want to go into more detail. Please listen to this this interview. We had a lot of fun. Two amazing human beings. I'm real hopeful that they will do a season 2 of Space Bastards. But man, we had a lot of fun talking about year 1, and I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Without further ado, here is Eric, Joe, and I talking about Space Bastards. Enjoy. Thank you. Well, hey everyone, welcome to the World at War Comics show. We have two special guests today. We have Joe Aubrey and Eric Peterson. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. Really excited to talk Space Bastards.
Thank you.
There too. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, man, it'll be a lot of fun. So I guess maybe we could just kind of start at the beginning, man. How did all this happen? The storyline. I just to preface, I saw some video on YouTube. I don't know if you were going to create movies out of it first or what was going on, but it was awesome, man. So I don't know what came first, issue 1 and Space Bastards, or some of the clips that you created around some of the characters in live action.
Are you talking about like the thing where like if you scan the QR code at the back of the comic? Yeah. So I'll take that one real quick.
Sounds good.
I went to film school and I was like a TV producer for a little bit, and in my spare time, I would make these short films and stuff. And around the same time of that, this was like 2004 or so, I met Joe and we became fast friends. And the thing about making like short films in your garage or whatever, which most of those they were like, we built like David Proton's like spaceship set, and it was made out of like plywood, and none of it's good, you know, but basically it's like, the thing is like everybody wants to know like the Dawson's Creek kid, like they think they do. They're like, I can't wait, I'm gonna help you out with your movies and all that stuff. But then they like spend a day, like a 15-hour day doing it, and then they're like, nah, screw this, like I'm out. And Joe was one of the few people that like just kind of like never seemed to get tired of it and was always sticking around. And originally the Space Bastards concept in movies was like, I wanted to make more Han Solo movies. Like, understand, this was like, you know, I mean, the prequels were out, but it wasn't like we didn't have the Mandalorian and stuff. So like for me, it was just kind of like I want it, not like in-universe Star Wars, but I like this like decrepit system or setting, and I want people who are like smugglers and whatnot. And the easiest thing, David Proton was the main character, and basically it was like this guy hates his job, and if they make him a postal worker, that's a perfect explanation for him to have a ship and then have like a MacGuffin, like have a thing to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
It was working with Joe throughout the course of that when he came up with the ideas of the Intergalactic Postal Service, the idea of like this competitive, like bloodthirsty version of Lyft or Uber,
Yeah.
And I think there was like one we did a bunch of shoots, we did a bunch of little small episodes, but it's hard to do a sci-fi thing. You can try and make it look purposefully corny, like a Sam Raimi kind of thing, but it only takes you so far. And after one especially difficult shoot, which was like we almost had the cops called on us. My genitals got electrocuted at one point.
Nice.
Whole thing. Basically, Joe and I were like, I had already started doing comics. I did another comic book series independently that had like moderate success. And I had because of that, I had met people in the industry. Like I met Derek Robertson and all that stuff. And Joe and I kind of came to the conclusion that we were like, if we made this as a comic, it would be a much better comic than it would be a no budget garage movie. And that was kind of it. That was the birth of Space Masters. And even then that takes us like halfway there. I think that started in like 2014 or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. So
a little safer on the genitals too.
Yeah.
It's my understanding. I haven't been hurt yet, so I've been reading comics for a long time. That's pretty awesome, man. So the concept was already there, and the comic book came second then.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then Joe, what about you? How did you were you in comics before you met Eric, or was your first introduction into comic creating with Eric?
That was with Eric. Yeah. I mean, I read comics, didn't collect them, wasn't into it like Eric was. And I read, things that caught my eye, back when, and kind of back in the 80s, in the early 90s, and then kind of fell away from it, except for, the odd thing that was recommended to me. And he had worked on this comic, and it made so much sense when we were sitting there with all this stuff strewn about, worried we was in my office building. We thought we were going to get evicted. And I thought, well, it would be fewer moving parts if we could just work with an artist, the writing was kind of similar. We didn't take the time we weren't just ad-libbing, to involve all these people. We did write things out, and he allowed me to contribute on some of that, like making outlines or dialogue and kind of work on it. And I didn't understand any of the camera stuff, or any of the editing stuff, but some of the or the order in which to film it, but the narrative stuff kind of fell into place. And I kind of got the character and kind of got the feel of what we wanted, and we could see what we were attempting. And then what we got was so far from what we were attempting that was just sort of a subtraction problem. And we could be, okay, we'll just put that into a comic. And but it was a big curve to know how to write, for an artist and in a script for a comic. And we went, Eric knew that already. And so initially I would just sort of read through it and edit or kind of ask questions or whatever, and then it took quite a bit of time. But that was the benefit to having the two of us writing together, is we could kind of toss it back and forth. And he was very patient, because I would just give him just shit, written on Word or on an email, real long email, and he would sort of take that and weave that back in, the stuff that he thought was valuable, or or whatever, or would read it, and we could. It was very collaborative, and it kind of brought me up to speed on that. But I mean, even now, I feel like he's always got to be the one to kind of throw the ball into my backyard before I can get going on it. I don't know if I could really start it from scratch, on my own.
Joe's being really nice, but like we can't understate that. Like Joe and I are well, I don't know if it's because of me or not, but we don't really write the scripts until very, very late in the game. For us, the outline is everything. And our outlines are super detailed, like, several pages long. I mean, I pretty much, when we're scripting it, I kind of am at that point just solely thinking dialogue and shots, because in comic scripts, you do have to call the panels out.
Sure.
So the biggest value in terms of having another writer is that during that outline stage, having that person to just volley back and forth. And even though, yeah, I mean, like we're working in Google Docs or whatever during that stage, it's immeasurable, like how valuable it is to just have that sounding board. Like I don't have to think of the audience. I don't have to think of readers. I don't have to think of anybody. All I think of is Joe. I know Joe and I have very similar, but very disparate tastes. Joe said that he doesn't read a lot of comics. He actually knows more about certain genres of comics than I ever will. And there's stuff that I read that Joe doesn't really, that I grew up reading that Joe's not really, it isn't his like slice, you know? And so it's kind of like when we do that outlining and we're doing that writing, it's that thing of just vaulting the ball back and forth and trying to kind of like if I can elicit a response out of Joe, or if Joe can elicit a response out of me, then I know that we have something good. And there's kind of a thing. There's like every single one of those issues in year one, it's kind of like we would have a finished script. Like we would think the outline's done. Mm-hmm. And then I would go to scripting. And then you just know it. You would just be like, we're just not laughing, or we're not getting that response out of each other. So that means it's not done. And so then we take a step back and approach it. That whole structure, like that whole way of working is different than when I'm writing alone. And because of that, it's just like the best thing in the world, you know?
Yeah. Tommy, tap out too if this is even longer than what you wanted.
No, this is beautiful.
I'm going to throw one more.
Please, yeah, no, this is awesome.
But the other part of it that was a surprise to me, you know, okay, you know, but maybe we were able to work together and just think about each other. But when we started submitting this stuff to artists, I mean, for Eric, you know, he kind of had an idea, okay, what this is going to look like visually, you know, and that was on a comic page, and I think that still that was really hard for me, and I didn't know the artists as well as he did. The different guys we worked on. I would kind of look at their stuff, but I really wouldn't know their sensibilities, and a lot of times I hadn't talked to them or didn't know them like he did, and so I didn't really know what they were going to turn it into. Mm-hmm. But after seeing Gabbo or Derek, you know, who we worked with earliest on, and the more artists we worked with, and getting their interpretations back, I mean, that helped me figure out, okay, I mean, it is different for every artist, but you know, what basic elements need to be in there and what you need to not say so that they can run with it. And that's, you know, a regular writer doesn't have to worry about that. They're just worrying about punctuation and, you know, does everything make sense and what's their editor going to say? But when you then hand it off to an artist, like it takes on I overwrote that. I put too much into that. You know, I needed to let them breathe and interpret that. And that was a whole other dynamic. That's like a Z axis that I didn't really think about after trying to tighten down and control so much with the filming. You know, we did so much, there was so much chaos. And then we would really try to lock it all down. And with this, we needed to actually kind of step back a little bit, I think.
And even then, it's not all artists. Every single artist is different. So there's ones I would never script, like we would do an outline and we kind of like would outline the year, but we would never outline an issue until we knew the artist. Like this is going to be the Bisley issue, you know what I mean? Or this is going to be Colin McNeil's issue or whatever. And then I would spend like weeks like only reading their stuff. I grew up reading a lot of 2000 AD and Transmet and Vertigo books and stuff like that. So, but I would like go back in and like only do that. So I'm kind of like thinking in terms of their eye. And then so when we do the scripts, like I feel like at that point when I'm scripting, it's like I'm writing to Joe, and then I'm almost like a director writing to an actor. Like, what's the direction I got to give to Bisley to get the best work out of him versus when I'm giving it to Derek or somebody, you know what I mean? Like everybody's, you really do get like if you do it that way, I do think you get like a really strong compass for like how to do it, because and I recently had to go back through the scripts and like kind of change them into something else for like another project, and rereading them, it does show like where you're like the Bisley scripts are totally different than like Colin McNeil scripts, or the Colin McNeil scripts are totally different than Derek Robertson scripts. You know, the direction is totally different. I mean, promise that's the end of that question.
No, I mean, that is beautiful. I mean, that's what this is all about, right? Is understanding the thought process that went into it. Because you've had a lot of success with it, as you should, because it's an incredible story. But I think a lot of people want to understand is the mind that went behind that, and then the preparation and all the steps that you took. So I think that's fabulous. You know,
a lot of it, if it helps, I mean, the only reason that we're so long-winded on this is because like if I go to a bar in my neighborhood and they're like, "You're the comic guy, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "So you're the writer." So that means you like put the words in the bubbles. Like, yeah, that's it. Yeah. So we're
That's all it is, man.
because
So
we're
easy.
like the air is thinner here, where we're like no one understands what we do, and like
How did
nobody
you find it, Tommy?
understands.
How did you come across it? You know, because it was a you know, an indie book. How did you? I mean, I can see
Yeah.
you've got the you know, the decor, the accoutrements of a connoisseur behind you there. I can
Yeah.
tell. You know, but
I have a little bit of an addiction issue, but certainly I love indie comics specifically because of stories like this. So obviously I'm a big DC fan, big Marvel fan. I love some of the bigger independents. But you know, they're really, they have to structure everything they do around canon, right? They've been around for 80, 90 years.
Right,
There's only
right.
so much you could do with Superman. And I love that about that, right? Because I like who Superman is. So if
Yeah.
someone comes in and all of a sudden, you know, Superman is functioning underwater like Aquaman, I'm going to have questions going, that's not Superman, right? That's Aquaman,
Right.
right? So, but when it comes to like indie comics, it really sky's the limit, right? You could create these stories and you don't have that canon that you have to stick to. So that's why I love indie comics for one. But two, as far as Space Bass, one of the things that I really enjoyed about Space Bass is really the character development. There are core characters, and some of them go through issues 1 through 9, right? You look at what's his name? Manny Corns.
Yeah.
That guy's freaking awesome. And then, you know, looking at the video that you did as far as the QR code with a little bit of hair that was sticking out.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean, you kind of see, I mean, I love that because I saw where your vision was. And then to your point, right, you give that vision to an artist and here's what the artist produced out of that. And then you could go back and you could look at those two, and there's so many similarities that maybe you wouldn't thought have been there, but they are there, right? Which I love about that. And as a comic book writer, right, you're limited by panel on how much you could say, right? Because it's not a novel, right? It is a comic book. So your art needs to tell a large portion of the story. I don't know if it's 50-50, if it's 60-40, whatever that is, but the art does need to tell some of that story. And when you have a really good artist and they're dialed in on what you're trying to do as a creator, man, it's just such an amazing dance between writers and an artist. And as a reader, you could feel that. And when you have an artist that maybe isn't in tune 100% with where the story goes, you could also see that in comics. And you see that more on the indie side. Although lately you're seeing a lot more of that on the DC and Marvel side because so many writers come in, then they go to Hollywood, and then a lot of the artists come in, they're bouncing around all the time. And that's not a knock on it. That's just the reality of the industry, right? People are looking for work and they're bouncing around. So they don't have this marriage to the character. And you could see that sometimes in the reading because sometimes the panels don't match the writing. But you, especially the first 5 issues, because I think there was a lot of consistency. I think you went with, there was a different artist, Beasley, right, in 6. So you could see that there was a little bit of a change, and that's not bad. It just took a little change. But in the first 5 issues, I mean, you could see all the way through 1 through 5, there's such a consistency between all the characters and the writing, which I love. I don't know if I answered your question, Joe, but I could really tell when an artist isn't aligned with the messaging. Because it comes out in the art, and all of a sudden you're like, you're saying this, but the character is doing something completely different, right?
So were you a fan of Derek's or something, and you heard about it, or you just saw it on the shelf, or how did you come across it?
Yeah, so I came across Space Bastards actually on not YouTube, on eBay. So I was farting around on eBay just looking for different comics, and Space Bastards came up. I looked at this cover and I said, I gotta have that. So I ordered one. And I read it and I fell in love with it. So I went to my local comic store. This is about 1.5 years ago or so. Wow. He goes, oh yeah, Space Bastards been around for a little while. And in his bin of back issues, he had a couple others. I don't know which issues he had, but I picked those up, went back to eBay, and then filled out the rest of the collection so that I could go back and read it all. And man, I just loved it. And so later on, through a whole bunch of other stuff, I created a podcast to really focus on indie comics and interview indie comic creators, writers, and artists. And, I've had this in my bin for a while. I'm like, man, I'm going to reach out and just see what happens. You never know if someone responds. And thank goodness you guys responded, because I am a big fan and I love what you both created. And I'm hoping that one day maybe there's more.
So do we. Yeah.
Yeah, we do too.
Yeah. Okay, good.
You
don't have to say anything more than that. That says it all right there. I mean, as long as there's a desire there, because I think you have a pretty good fan base. And with the graphic novels, the hardbound that came out right now, I think that's an amazing addition to a collection, and then hopefully prepare for year two.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing I'll just mention real quick, because
Yeah.
now that I know kind of how you found it and all that stuff too. So you mentioned the art change after
Yeah.
issue 5. So
Mhm.
originally, the way that we had constructed it was like, I guess what you would call issues 1 through 5, and then the two-parter that comes later. You know, the
Like arcs.
the Derek's work. And when we realized like he was going to need more time to do it and whatnot, that was kind of when Joe and I were like, man, you know, it'd be really cool to like work with a lot of my heroes, my other art heroes, and have the either origin stories or side stories that kind of weave in and out of that, right? And so first one we did was Chuck with Simon, and then or no, actually no, that's not right. Chuck was later.
We
It
did
was
Resurrection.
we did Resurrection
toward
Mary
the
first,
end,
Colin
right?
Reveal, right? And
Yeah.
then which isn't in any of the single issues, and then Bisley, I met Bisley, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll work on some." And then we ended up doing 3 issues with Bisley, and then Boo Cook and Clint Langley, who's been wonderful and everything. It was kind of cool to like sort of like orchestrate these sort of stories that weave in and out. And then when we realized we were telling things out of order, first thing I think we did was create the hardcover order, which volumes 1 through 4 in the hardcovers kind of do. I'll take the first volume, for example. It does issues 1 and 2, and then it does the Chuck story, which is vastly different, but it has a purpose. It ties into issue 2, you know? And so our logic was like, if we can throw a curveball and readers still stick through it or whatever, then we can do whatever we want. You know, we know that they'll trust us. And so we did more. And it wasn't until we worked with Humanoids that we were like, let's do kind of like 1 through 5. And then there's kind of like a logical point there where things change at the end of 5. And then we'll dive into some of those side stories. Same thing. There's some readers I find that kind of go, oh, I'm lost now. And then, but luckily the greater majority I feel kind of stick around and check it out and dig it. So, yeah.
No, I mean, when you get to issue 6, there is a big change. But I actually really like that story, and the art was perfect for the story that you were telling. I think it was, what was his name? Chuck the Magic Wagon. Yeah, that was a trip, man. I loved it. It was an awesome character.
Anyways, I just wanted to tell you that for that, like the reason why those changes happen and like why
we would have changed we would have, so we did that. We're like, it's so jarring. It is very different. And then we began thinking like, it was also delightful to see 2 different or 3 different artists render the same characters, because then you start to see the characters almost become bigger. There's certain elements, like you were talking about with the video, there's certain elements that get carried across different artists, and that was really nice. And you could see how these artists saw the story and saw their character. And so the original idea was we'll flip in and out of these side stories early and frequently, but because it was a monthly book rather than the binge model we have with the hardcovers, to hold on to the readers from month to month, that artwork needs to be consistent. We really need to hook them and keep them on board. And Derek's, doing 5 issues of Derek before, and then there's a kind of a logical break, like you guys were saying, the story before we divert off was the way to do it. It was the way they felt like they should do it. And
I still feel like the hardcover order is kind of my perfect order, but it's I don't think it works. Like Joe's saying, I don't think it works in a monthly periodical release that way. But the cool thing about it is that by the end of the whole first year run, it was really cool to see 2 different readers. Like you would get the people who read it hardcover, and then you get the people that read it month to month, and it's like the views sometimes align, and then they're kind of different, and some people know things that other people don't.
For sure. Cool. Especially if you brought issue 6 into issue 3 in the hardcover, right? All of a sudden, right here, you got, was that 3 months worth of storytelling that has now been changed for that person who's buying it on a monthly basis.
Exactly.
That was still a lot of fun, man. I really enjoyed it. So as far as character development, what I would love to know next is how far in advance did you know the core characters? Probably like 5 or 6 characters that are core throughout the whole thing, right? Did you have that development of those characters when you were doing, videos in your garage, and then that became part of the comic book? Or as you wrote issue 1, you started adding new characters?
Manny Corns and Davey were essentially, their basic attributes were there. I think. Some of their motivation we changed, when the universe got fleshed out a little differently. But their rivalry, that tension between them, was there from kind of from the beginning once we got Manny Corns in there. I think the ensemble cast idea, once we
You were mostly there, but they were changed. Like Leroy was always gonna be around when we get to him, but we never did. And then by the time that we were working with Derek and he was actually designing the visual look of the characters, that's kind of when like for me it's McNulty. He looks like McNulty to me. And so like for me it's like
Now
once Derek did that, then I was like that's Leroy then or whatever. Or likewise the thing of like, you know, Manny was based on a real person. So I think originally we were thinking he was human, and he did. He was just like a big guy with a weird haircut. And then it was Derek that turned him into an alien. And then we're like, God, it's just, you go through that process and you're like, oh, that's like perfect or whatever. Yeah. Zordak was a little bit different. Roy always existed in the movie.
That's right.
I played him in the movies, but I had him more as like a Ron Burgundy type. And he didn't really transform into, like, I know how Roy walks now, like, and I know how he sounds. And that was really issue 2. I mean, that was really issue 1 and 2, like getting to that comic stage and going like, oh, he's shorter actually than I imagined. And he kind of walks like Raoul Duke, you know what I mean? He walks like Hunter S. Thompson's character in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you know, like stuff like that. There's like little gaps that I think get filled with when the artists start designing, you know.
It was during that outline phase, and after we really established, okay, this is an ensemble group kind of thing, more so than just focused on Davey. That Layla and some of these other characters came in, and we really knitted it all together, and we gave them all. You know, Eric's thing was, you know, they get what they get what they need, they don't get what they want, you know, we'll get what they deserve, maybe. They don't get what they want, and
getting what they set out to do doesn't mean what they think it means. So they accomplish goals, but it now they have more to deal with, or there's consequences of it. You know, that was like a big thematic thing for us. Yeah.
Like, where do we want them all to end up? And I think you know, some of the little details, I think we made some changes, you know, but for the most part, once we were engaged with Derek, it was
pretty nice, huh?
Yeah.
That whole process was really great.
Oh, go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just saying that whole process too, when we were translating the characters to get the official designs from Derek. I mean, that was a several month-long process, and it was like really, really cool. It was awesome to just see that work, you know.
Yeah.
See that character come to life, right?
Yeah.
Did you notice from fans certain characters that stood out as favorites of the fans that maybe you were surprised about?
I don't know if surprised, but
yeah,
there's definitely like the top 3. Like there's the ones that stuck out where I was like, yeah, all right. And what's funny about it, what is funny about it is demographics. I will say that I was surprised by that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you go into a little more detail of who the 3 were and the demographics?
Yeah, women. Well, I'll tell you the big one. Women love Zordak, and I think that's the funniest thing in the world to me. It's like, it makes no sense to me at all. I get that he's cute, you know, I understand, but you know, he's easily the weirdest, and also
for sure.
You know,
I didn't think that it was going to fly. I mean, I was really scared about that, because we kind of thought this is going to be Jar Jar. You know, we're going to really be fucked here. The speech and everything, it may be too much. You know, maybe too much, and it may be, but maybe it is too much. We just leaned into it, and when that went, that 3rd issue, by the time that came out, and like, we weren't getting destroyed, you know, when people weren't like, what happened, you know, when that, and then and then the 4th issue, that cover and everything, I think that I feel
like you all embrace that this is bigger than we thought it was going to be in issue 4, right? To put them on the cover like that.
We have a Mayor McCheese now. We got a there it is. Yeah, we could throw that thing out there, and you know, people understand. But I think Derek likes that character the best. That's the one he really relishes drawing. That's the one he identifies with. It's really strange, you know. And I think he puts so much heart into it, and the acting. You know, like this thing's got a butthole mouth and an eye like a spider, you know, and tentacles. But it, you know, it's like surprised and like pissed off and like afraid, and he will draw it with, you know, with reactions to a human, so you know what is emotion is supposed to be. But he did such a good job with that you're just kind of like, oh, okay, you know. And I think without the art, the way that it was, it wouldn't have worked, you know.
There's a weird thing with Zordak too, where it's like just going back to the female thing as well, is that like if we were to take Leroy and Zordak, it's like I think Zordak's actually potentially the more dangerous, maybe. But for some reason, I think women would feel safer around Zordak, and they
Yeah.
like Zordak's probably not going to roofie them, you know?
Yeah.
Like he's just a little bit like I can't call Zordak creepy or shady or anything like that. I just call him, he's just weird and he's just almost affable in his infantile kind of. I don't even call it humor; it's just how he is. Whereas like the other characters, certain other characters, you're like, no, that's a shitty dude. I mean, that's a guy.
That's a terrible human being. Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
There was an early email. I don't know where we were. I think it was an ash can, or we were Eric and I were just discussing something. I remember he emailed me one time and he had said, "Well, everybody loves Roy," and this was we hadn't published anything. I mean, people had read maybe a prototype, and I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Everybody loves Roy. Who, like 3 people that have read our, but I didn't call him out on. But then, issue 2 comes out, and again, before Zordak, even I thought, oh fuck, this is going to be a problem, because we're double down on this guy. Hopefully people understand, that he's, he's just a prick. He's just an ass. And so I was surprised by that, and a lot of people really like Roy. They just really like him, and people will pick up the book and be like, "I'm feeling this guy here in the back." They'll just say that, which is, and it's just Roy pointing at them, like Uncle Sam, and so that's. Again, I got to credit Eric with Derek with that, with the visual, the look of it. But so that's the part. Manny Corns I thought people would like, because it's just Derek doing what he does best, rippling, his veiny arms and violent and crazy, chewing a cigar. But people responded well to the characters. I mean, none of them seem to be grating or bother people, and those 2 I think are hard to like, and that was a surprise.
There's a weird math with that stuff too, where like I'll take Roy, like he's got a lot of behavior that is deplorable and certainly not stuff we would advocate, but like once you put those guys up against Wayne, who actually is like, I think morally, arguably a better, like he has less deplorable behavior, but he's less morally aligned. Exactly. What it does is it serves as kind of a mirror. So all of a sudden, like there's this whole thing that Zordak says later on where he's just like, Roy doesn't think twice about you, but you're obsessed with getting rid of the Postal Service. So the thing is like what that does is it's like every single deplorable character we have in terms of their habits and their lifestyle, etc. You still do have like a center thing with all of them where they're just guys trying to find their way in the universe, and they feel outcast and they feel like, disenfranchised, and like you can take it a long way.
Yeah.
Not too far, but there's a certain level you can take it to where once people see that reflection and they go like, okay, like I get it. You know what I mean? Like it's the same reason why like Tarantino characters are like still likable, or like why we watch Breaking Bad or something too. You know?
You almost end up pulling for some of them too, right? Like those kind of connections are made, and even though they're terrible as an individual, when you see their situation, what they're going through, and what they're just trying to accomplish in life in general, just to get by, as deplorable as they might be, you find yourself kind of hoping that they pull through, right? Even though they probably deserve to be the next one to have a grenade thrown at them as they're all going toward a package or something, right?
That Leroy bit in the second to the last issue, like without spoiling it, but like that moment with Leroy and the camp, to me is it's one of my favorite moments because it makes me laugh really hard, and it was hilarious when Joe pitched it to me. And then it was hilarious. I was sitting on a plane next to Derek when he read it on the script, and so I got to watch Derek's reaction where he's just like, "Wait, no, wait, oh." My favorite thing about it is the fact that it's not only like really kind of like juvenile, funny, but also relatable. Like we've all been like summer camp and not wanted to be there. But then there's this other side to it from a character standpoint where it's like we're doing something that's really shocking and crazy, but it actually does serve the character because. Leroy gets his moment. Like Leroy gets that moment where you're just kind of like, I think this dude probably, I mean, like, I think he hates women. I think he's got a lot of issues, but the hand's been dealt, and like, there's nobody else that can help that situation. And despite being the kind of character he is, you chip all that away, and he's gonna help that situation. He's gonna do it his own way, and it's destructive and it's terrible, etc. But I do think with readers like that again, it's like you're like, all right, like that's where we are, with these guys.
No, so true, so true, so true. So as far as the character development, right? We have about those 6 or 7 characters. How difficult is it to develop characters outside of that core that maybe kind of intertwine throughout the 9 issues, but maybe don't have a lot of focal point? How do you stay focused to remember who they are? Or is that an issue?
Do you have an example?
Like Woodrow, or like
yeah, exactly, Joe.
Woodrow,
Yeah,
or Mr. Radish, maybe.
Mr. Radish, yeah.
Or some of the other.
Because that's a big part of a storytelling too, right? You have the character development of the characters that are going to help take you through the entire story, but even those characters need characters around them to help uplift them to a certain extent, right? That way they remain the main characters, and you could kind of allow them to shine, even though in a terrible way in a lot of instances. I still think just the world building maybe is a better way to put it around all of these is just absolutely incredible as well. How much time did you spend on that outside of those core characters in the main story?
So I think Woodrow's a kind of an interesting example because like he's functional. Like he serves a function, and the function really is bolstering Wayne and being there. But then he also, there was a point when Woodrow was not the guy that fires or lays off Davey. It was going to be somebody else, just like another boss, right? And so like we decided kind of actually late in the game to make it Woodrow, so that way he's consistent through the whole. He like plays a function through the whole narrative, not just being like Wayne's like right hand guy. And then without spoiling again, but what happens to him? I mean, that's the other thing. It's tough because it's kind of like, yeah, like to your point, we don't want to detract from the story and give you like Woodrow's like backstory, right?
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, it was important that he plays enough of a role functionally to bolster Wayne, and then to also like play a role in like Davy's life, and then like that's in Radish maybe a little bit to a lesser point, but Radish has this big fight with who as well. So and actually Radish's like biological story came in late in the game, and that was again functional, right? Like by us adding that to Radish and really cementing him that way, it actually kind of like ties into Manny's backstory, and so now he plays a function as well. So
we'd have the we gave us the ability to do that also, and I don't know if you're referring to since some of the side stories, like when we did the which I don't know if you have the Resurrection Mary side story where there's a lot of compete there, have a side bet between all these postal carriers, or where we had the Calto and Manny story together, where we had Calto had kind of crew with these other prisoners that were there with him, that he kind of rallied. Those guys, I mean, we kind of thought about it like, well, what kind of characters have we already seen? Calto was kind of a minor character in the main arc. What kind of characters have we seen him be around, and then what happens when we shine a light on him, and what kind of people can we put in there that are different, but that support him and emphasize who he is. And so it still relates to the characters we really care about. We put these guys in orbit around them to highlight their individuality, I guess. And then even in the individual 7 issues, we kind of hone in on a particular character, or hone in more on Roy or whatever. And so some of the other characters, even like Manny Corns in that issue too, which a lot of people forget, but he's in there, and you recognize him, but he's really there just to show you the length that Roy will go to. So we kind of pull him down and water him down a little bit or angle him to show a different to tell Roy's story better. So you would just sort of change the focus a little bit in the main arc, and then some of those other characters just kind of get born out. And a lot of them I really like. I mean, come on, we kill, and they don't make it. And a couple of them I see, I think like they probably made it into the service, or they're probably still out there somewhere, and they need to be brought back in, and would be brought back in a subsequent year, or if Calto had his own title, that, a bunch of those guys would be in there, or
Yeah.
they would be part of it, but I can see them weaving back in if they say if they live. A lot of these characters, don't live very long in this universe, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially those first two issues, boy. I remember reading them, going, "Man, there's gonna be nobody left by the time we get to like issue 3," which is a lot of fun, man. It's just so cool, man, so cool, and that freedom to be able to do that, because a lot of times in comics, right there isn't really, especially with the main characters, right, and I guess in any story the same way, but there really isn't, at the end of the day, right? Nothing's going to happen to that character because the comic book is written around that character.
Yeah.
Whereas, especially the first couple issues, I don't think most readers of Space Bastards had that kind of confidence that some of the characters that they saw. And there's like a different type of stakes as you're reading the comic book, because you don't want to get too emotionally attached to any character because you don't know what's going to happen. And I do believe that is the power of Space Bastards as well. And you've seen it in other movies too, on HBO, and they've done a really good job where no one's safe kind of type thing, right?
Yeah.
So you're really dialed in to get as much out of that character as you can, because you don't know if they're going to be here the next episode. I felt the same way with Space Bastards, which was pretty awesome.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So as far as maybe what's next, I'm sure you're limited on what you're able to say, but one of the first questions I asked was, do you think we'll ever get more? And there's a desire for more. Do you already kind of have an idea that if you do have more, what direction you're going to go? Not that we need to talk about that, but do you kind of already have an idea of what that is, just in case that happens?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. That's so cool, man.
Yeah. We things are different at the end.
Yeah.
And
very different.
And I think there's some other types of characters that could be inserted and kind of added in, and but I think also the service is in a whole different set of hands at the end of this, and at the end, I think the thing, even though you may not have been able to root confidently for any one particular character to survive, we really want everybody to root for the service to survive. The Postal Service, because that's the engine. That has to live, and if everything else changes, as long as that is there and there's some version of that, then I think the reader stays engaged. But there are other kinds of threats that we can subject it to, internal threats, changes in the system, or whatever that will these guys will resist or not do well with. So we thought through some of that, and
awesome.
Thought about what we want to happen with our characters, and there's a lot of stories to tell here. We'd really like to keep doing it.
Yeah, that would be amazing to keep reading it for sure. Where did you know that this was like a huge success? Was it right off the bat after issue 1? You're like, wow, this is bigger than we thought it would be? Or did it take a few issues to kind of build and get the word out? Like, what was your experience on those first couple issues?
I think to answer your first question, we're still waiting. I think like 2025, maybe we'll feel that.
Is it going to happen?
No, we knew there were a few things. It was like the volume 1 hardcover came out before the humanoid stuff, and to a very small audience, like a few hundred people, and the response to that it was mostly overseas, was really positive. And then there were definitely a lot of independent publishers who were interested in it, and then some that surprised us where we thought they would be interested in it, but they weren't. So of course, on our end, we start having questions of validity. You know what I mean? We're like, maybe maybe we've got like a big pimple on our face and we can't see it or something. You know what I mean? It's just it's weird. And then it was like, the cool thing about the humanoids thing at the time was that Mark Waid was the publisher, and so very early on in that whole process, we had a meeting with him, and it was clear that he really got it, and he got it in a way. Like when Joe talks about Space Bastards, I know I'm like in good company. Like he gets it from top to bottom, right? And Mark Waid was really similar. So then we were like, okay, well, that's cool. Like we're not crazy. We're not like screaming this and nobody's picking up the vibration. You know what I mean? Everybody's, and then Yeah, and then it was like issue one numbers were really, really good. And we knew that was going to be palpable. It was also weird though, because understand when it first came out, it was like early 2021. So it was right after the pandemic. Well, you know what I mean? Like right after lockdown year and all that. And so it wasn't like we had conventions to go to immediately be like, these are the people that have been buying it at the stores. It wasn't until, I'm trying to think what my first convention was. I want to say it was New York, 2021, maybe, when I went out there and people were coming up with issues for me to sign. And I was like, holy crap, these people exist. Like it's a real thing, you know?
That's so cool. How about you, Joe? Did you have the same kind of feeling about it?
Yeah, I think that endorsement from Mark Wade was quite.
Mark Wade is like very high on the totem pole of writers for me, to be honest, as a DC fan.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, he was very complimentary of the the writing of the first issue. It was really sweet, and he sent us a little cover with a little handwritten note, and I mean, maybe that's what publishers do. It's just part of the formula to kind of keep you in there, and whatever. But it was really, really nice. He was always really good, and he clearly got the book and read it, and I think there was that, and there were a couple of early reviewers with the hardcover before we were with the publisher. There was a guy named Carl at Shelf Abuse, and another guy at You Don't Read Comics, Russ Bickerstaff, and I've sent those guys books, because they read the books and gave us detailed, serious reviews, took it seriously and read the books and wrote these long reviews. I mean, they're busy guys. They were reviewing other stuff. They're getting sent material all the time, and I often had to reread those reviews while writing subsequent issues and while submitting to publishers and getting rejected and getting everything else, arguing with Eric and whatever. I'd read those just to because they were so thoughtful and so they clearly got it, and it was very reaffirming. It was very affirming. It was really helpful. I really appreciated it from those guys, and I think now seeing people at shows and all that and hearing even somebody talk about the characters or mention the character's name. I mean, this is something that was just been in our brains, was in our brains for like 8 years before anybody even read anything. And so you hear someone else even say the name of the character, mention Zordak or Kalto. I remember somebody did an interview. And I mean, again, to be late, make this question and answer even longer.
No, it's good.
There was an online interview we did one time, and this guy, I think it was Travel and Root Beer, or it might be, I think it was Travel and Root Beer, said he was one of those guys from Sparks, those guys, there's these 4 guys that at the time were regularly going on and interviewing people. But he said, at this point, it's a brand. I mean, we didn't ask him anything, but he was like issue 4 or maybe it was issue 5, the first one with Simon drawing it, and he's like, it doesn't matter. He goes, at this point, Space Bastards is a brand, and that was I remember that very vividly, which is he's a random dude, but he knew what he was talking about.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that's very rewarding, I would think.
Yeah.
I think it's that thing. I think the biggest ingredients for us, like externally, has always been when we see a review or somebody, it could be that, it could be Mark Wade or whatever, but it's like, that's the connective tissue between it all. It's like, whenever we know that, like, whatever we're screaming is being heard the right way. Like, that's a big thing. Like whenever somebody says Leroy's last name to me, I get like really surreal. Like, I'm like you remember my character's last name, you know what I mean? Or it's like, it's when people understand the thematic work behind it or whatever. It's like any of that little stuff where you're just kind of like, oh no, I can tell that you care about this on a level more than just spending 2 seconds looking at the art every page or whatever, which the art's fantastic. I love all of our artists, but it's like anytime that we know that it's resonated with somebody on the same wavelength at which we constructed it, that's like, okay, cool. We're not like wasting our time.
So we love these videos and these interview shows, and when the video reviewers, those Comics Elite guys interviewed us or not interviewed, but they interviewed us late at one point, but they were reviewing issue 5, and they were talking about it, and they got to the page where Chuck's taking a piss in front of these children in an elevator, and they're like, the first page, and they just break down laughing, and they can't continue their review. They're both just laughing so hard, and that was really nice. That was and there's another guy. I was like, this old man. I don't remember who he is. He's an old dude. I mean, older than me. And he's sitting there reviewing it, and he goes, and it was issue 3, and he goes, and they drug him, and then they burned down the whorehouse, and he just starts laughing.
Oh, I love it.
He
I
goes,
love
I
it.
don't think I can explain it. He says, it's so funny.
It's
And
unexplainable, man.
that's what we're,
Yeah.
what we want. I'm hoping that happens. When anybody sits down and reads, like, what the fuck, what's going on?
I mean, I think that's the hook, to be quite honest. When you read that first issue, there is a what the fuck is going on here type of feeling that you get that wants you to continue to move forward, right? Like,
Yeah.
I got to get issue 2. And that's the thing that happened. I had issue 1. I'm like, well, I got to get issue 2. I'm like, damn it. So I went on, I think I got issue 2 on eBay and then went back to my store and they had a few issues there. But either way, it was that hook of it's so outrageous in certain portions of it, specifically from a comedic standpoint, that you're like, I got to keep going, man. This is too good. This is too good. It's just, you don't see a lot of that in comics very often, especially done well. I mean, we know other comics that are similar to that, like The Boys, and there's some that have done it really well. But Space Bastards, you guys just nailed it, man. That comedic timing and everything about it, man. There's enough gore and enough comedy to keep me hooked, man. I love both those two things are really important. Yeah.
It's very nice. Yeah.
How often are you all doing shows right now? Talking about your hardbound and anything else that you're doing. Are you still doing quite a bit of shows throughout the year, or are you kind of slowed down in 2023 around there?
We need to do more for sure. It's hard. I mean, some genius decided to make our Prime export like 3 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, it's a huge hardcover book. And so the problem is that, like, San Diego, I just did San Diego Comic-Con. That's easy enough. I can stock up my car, drive it out there. I'm all right. Even though, like, San Diego's expensive and the hotel we stay at's expensive, et cetera. But then, like, I miss New York. I didn't do New York last year, and I like New York's like one of my favorites, and Emerald City is one of my favorites and all that. But then there's always the problem of, like, how many books can we take on a plane, and how do we get them there safely, and how many do we actually need to sell to make it profitable? It's a logic thing we haven't quite solved for yet.
Yeah, no, definitely a math equation that needs to be figured out.
Totally, yeah.
We've done some local show. I mean, I think there's the Arizona Comic Book Arts Festival that'll be yearly. That was really good. We did that earlier this year, and we do appearances at the local comic shop when they have free comic book day. We had we went out to the not this year, but that Comic-Con Revolution in
Ontario.
Yeah, in Ontario. We were there last year. And that's drivable. We can pull that off. That was a pretty good show. And Emerald City, and some of these are just, I don't know, kind of too far. If we have more to I don't know. I'd like to go to all of them. Eric, for a while there, Eric was going to everything, man. He went to Enniskillen, Ireland, Northern Ireland. He went to
really?
Yeah, he went to What was that? Lawgiver? What was the
yeah, there's like a 2000 AD centric kind of show that's out in
UK, man.
In the UK as well, that I love going to. I was supposed to go there this year, but same thing, I had to cancel on them, which sucks. But we like did the math, and I was like, airfare internationally plus trying to get enough books there. I can't. That being said, though, is that we are actually making headway in terms of figuring out kind of like UK distribution and other ways for us to like have books there already, and that'll really help. So
we don't have to make money on all these shows, but we have to.
Yeah, certainly don't want to walk away losing a ton either, though.
Losing a shitload of money on every show. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I'm in it as a fan. So I wrote a comic book, but it'll be a while before I ever make any money. But when you have, when you get scale like this, it makes it a little bit easier. But then, like you said, packaging, delivery, all of a sudden you have new forms of costs that eat away at your profitability. So it gets a little tough for sure.
Yeah.
Well, very good, gentlemen. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, getting to meet both of you. I'm a huge fan. I'm ready whenever you guys pick up the pen, and Derek or whoever picks up the art. Again, I'm ready for it, man. If there's anything I could do to help, please let me know. I would love to have you back on when things start getting rolling and you do kind of have a path forward that you're ready to share with everybody. Love for you to come back on. I know there's a lot of people, at least in my circle, that love Space Bastards, and they're all pulling for a season 2 for sure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
anybody who, if they do want to support season
Yeah.
2 and help make it happen, go to spacebastards.com. On
Okay,
there,
spacebastards.com.
you can buy the hardcovers. The hardcovers, 100% of that money goes directly towards funding the artists and the printing for season 2. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I will definitely mention that on our social to get that word out there. But yeah, gentlemen, thank you so much, especially late at night. I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for the flexibility. And man, have a great weekend. Hopefully you get to enjoy some time not talking about Space Bastards, maybe. I don't know.
We love to talk about it. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.